Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam and today I'm going to be talking about some of those big old thick chunky books that I love. I'm doing this because I've recently been talking about shorter books on my channel. My last video was about short stories and how I don't really gel with them, which is also a bit of a cry for help for stories that I might like, which still applies, so let me know. And I've also started a video series called Short But Substantial Books. So those books that are tiny, but really pack in a lot in them. But really, I'm a sci-fi and fantasy lover, and we know that those genres have big, old, chunky books. And obviously, I love them. I feel there's a lot more room to explore whatever the book wants to explore. So I'm going to talk about 10 of my favorites. It's not going to be a top 10, just talking about 10 of my favorites. I didn't really want to rank them, but 10 because base 10 is YouTube's friend. Everyone likes the number 10 on YouTube. So 10 of my favorites. Once again, I need to apologize for the conditions because we had a big old storm through the night and into the morning. So you may hear some remnants of it coming through, some wind, some snow, some hail, whatever. So if you hear that, I apologize, but I don't have time to make videos over the next few days, so we must push through. So with that and much further ado, let's talk about some door stoppers. So the first book I'm going to talk about, I've never actually talked about on my channel before, which is kind of surprising because it is one of my favorite books of all time, and it is Shogun by James Clavell. So not even a sci-fi or fantasy book, which is kind of surprising on my channel. But I read this at the start of last year in preparation for my honeymoon in Japan, which was the best 3 weeks of my life, by the way. That country is beautiful. And it was my favorite book of last year. So all 1,100 plus pages were brilliant. I was hooked throughout the whole book. But this is historical fiction set in around 1599, based on the rise of the Tokugawa clan before the shogunate took over for 250 odd years, where they weren't letting any foreigners in. So it's hugely political based book. But is also a character-focused book. This is mainly about the characters, including the Englishman who is stranded on the island, but also the political battles that go on, all the backstabbing and the plotting. And if you love characters and political thrillers, this is for you. It's not hugely high on action, which is surprising for a samurai world. But it is super gripping, and if you're interested in Japan and history, you have to read this book. You won't regret it. So we have to address the elephant-sized books in the room near the start of this video, because I know you're going to be shouting it at your screen, and that is, of course, the Stormlight archive. I only have here The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance because my hands started getting tired when reading these books, so I decided to read the Oathbringer and Rhythm of War digitally. This series I am really enjoying. I've yet to decide how much I enjoy it, and I think the fifth book will decide that. I did put it high in, well, I put it at number 9 in my top 10 series, but I'm umming and ahhing over whether that's the case. So we'll see after next month. But obviously this is a huge, high, epic fantasy book with humongous world building, extremely intricate world building and detailed magic systems, complicated large-scale plots, millions of characters. And that's why they're completely huge. Could he have split them into more books? I think probably so. And I think the series probably would have benefited from it because sometimes they get a bit bloated. Some of these words, some of these pages could have been cut down. And that's also why I'm still umming and ahhing about the series. But this is a great series and these books are absolutely huge. And yeah, I would recommend giving it a go, and it's a brilliant time to do so. So I couldn't really talk about huge books without talking about my favorite series of all time. And if you've watched my channel at all, you'll know that it is The Wheel of Time. I've got these beautiful old copies where the covers are like these cheesy, disgusting pictures, but I kind of love them for that. I love the old school style. But anyway, obviously this series is made up of 14 huge books. None of them are under 700 pages. This is the biggest book within the series, The Shadow Rising. And like the Stormlight archive, it's just a huge, epic, sweeping story with humongous world building, loads of characters, very intricate, twisty-turny plot. So he needed lots of time and lots of pages to describe everything he wanted to, as well as all of their dresses and all of their food, like in a lot of classic-ish fantasy. I call this a bridge series between classic and modern. But anyway, rambling as usual. This one is about 1,000 pages, and it's where this series really kicks off. But also I want to mention the last book, The Gathering Storm, which is 900-ish pages, and it is almost all an entire battle. Now, I'm not always interested in huge battles. It depends who's doing them and the importance of the battle, but the importance of this battle after 13 books meant that I was super gripped throughout, and there are just so many moving parts, and I absolutely love it. It was a brilliant ending to the series, and I got this first edition hardback copy in a secondhand bookshop, and I was so happy. But look at the size of it. You could really cause someone some damage with this book. I'll go from my favorite series to one of the most popular series ever, and probably will be one of the most popular series for an extremely long time. That is obviously A Song of Ice and Fire with A Clash of Kings, which is, you know, over 1,100 pages again, and it is one of the most highly regarded fantasy books ever to have been released, and I completely agree. This is my favorite in the series, just like a lot of people. And it's just a real crescendo of the tension that has been building up over the last 2 books with, you know, some of the most iconic scenes in fantasy history. And this is where character development within the series is just really, really fleshed out and just becomes so nuanced and confusing and brilliant and heart-wrenching. So, you know, George really hit the nail on the head with this book, and it did not feel like 1,100 pages. One of the best massive books ever. Another one of my favorite series is The Realm of the Elderlings. Now, this is a 16-book series, and most of the books are humongous, apart from the first one, and also the 4th sub-series has like shorter books within it as well. But yeah, she really did like writing humongous books. I've even seen a quote from her saying, like, once she saw George R.R. Martin and Robert Jordan writing these humongous books, she realized that she could do the same, and she took that opportunity. She writes a lot of massive books, and this book, The Mad Ship, is the biggest within the series as far as I can tell, and this is part of the Live Ship trilogy, the second trilogy in the whole Realm of the Elderlings, which is one of my favorite series ever. I mean, the trilogy. Live Ship Traders is just so astounding what she does, and again, it's to do with world building and character development, and she really uses the page time to expand this world and tell a gripping plot and just develop these characters in an astounding, heart-wrenching, beautiful way. The whole concept of this series is kind of strange, but I suggest if you roll with it and be patient, the reward at the end of the trilogy is totally worth it, and you will be blown away. So next, I want to highlight one author and talk about 3 of his books. He is one of my favorite authors of all time. If you haven't checked out my top 10 author list, then please watch that video and see how high, but it's pretty high, and it's Stephen King. So he is obviously known for writing loads of books, and a lot of them are absolute bricks. And the brickiest of them all is, of course, The Stand. Now, my copy says it's about 1,400 pages. I know page count is a bit weird. Depending on the edition, you don't know how many pages it's going to be, but you cannot deny that this is humongous. It might be the biggest one I've read. I didn't check word counts. But obviously this is an apocalyptic book, and I love apocalyptic books. And this is a sterling example of an apocalypse with, you know, you have the before the apocalypse, the during, the fallout, and the rebuild. So to do all of that really well, and to do the classic Stephen King thing of having a humongous cast, but getting to know everybody and their characters developing through the story, you have to have a humongous page count, and that is what he's really good at, and this is a perfect example of that. And another one that people know of course, is It. Now this battered old copy, I love battered old copies, doesn't really look that big, but it is. It's over 1,100 pages, so it is massive, and basically what applied to The Stand applies here. What it's really about is developing a humongous cast of characters and developing their characters over the course of the story. It's not really about the big bad. That is obviously important, but what's really important is the large cast of characters and getting to know them well and all of their distinctions. But also within this, you see the characters as children and as adults and how they are different. So there's two ways that he is developing the characters. So again, you need a lot of pages to do that. And he does it really well. And what I love about this is about how trauma as a child affects you into your adulthood. And so he looks at both of them and it's just brilliant. Yes, even with the iconic horrible scene, I didn't like the scene, I didn't really understand it, but the 99% rest of the book was absolutely brilliant. And the final one I'll talk about with Stephen King, I don't have physically, is Dark Tower, the 7th book in the Dark Tower series. This is one of my favorite series of all time, but it's obviously hard to talk about the last book in a series. But let's just say the weirdness is cranked to 11. We're constantly flitting between worlds, and everything just comes to a head. So it deserves its page count. I really loved it. I know not everybody loves the ending of Dark Tower. It has some controversial techniques that Stephen King uses, but I actually really enjoyed it. It helps that I didn't have to wait between the books. So for me, that was an excellent ending to one of my favorite series of all time and a humongous book to finish. So the final books I'll talk about in this list, it's actually two, so I'm kind of cheating, but it's the Commonwealth saga by Peter F. Hamilton, which I've talked about a couple of times. For example, in my British space opera video, you should go and check that out. I'm quite proud of it, even though it's kind of silly and tongue-in-cheek, but that's just what I'm like. Anyway, this is a duology. Both books are over 1,100 pages long. Could it be spread into other books? Probably, but basically this is just one story, so it's probably even hard for him to split it into two because there isn't really an obvious place to split it. It's just one humongous story, and obviously it is a grand sweeping space opera, and it's all about discovery, first contact, gritty war, difficult decisions, crazy aliens, impact of tech, that kind of stuff. And again, the character development is actually brilliant, which isn't common in sci-fi, but there's one particular character in this series that I feel just completely changes and becomes awesome when she was not awesome at the start. And it's just absolutely fascinating series and humongously chunky, but I was never bored in either of these humongous books. I was gripped the whole time. So if you're into space opera that is quite deep and sometimes difficult, I really recommend you give it a go. This is one of my favorite series of all time. So that's it for my favorites list. I'm just going to quickly reel off some of the massive books that I plan on reading soon. The obvious one is Wind and Truth, which comes out next month, the end to the Stormlight archive. I'll be reading that straight away. My priority series for next year is Dandelion Dynasty, which is made up of 4 humongous books, so I'm really excited about that. I want to read Malazan. I'm hoping to start it next year, and again, that is 10 huge, difficult, deep fantasy books. That's kind of the short-term TBR. So long-term, I want to read more Peter F. Hamilton. I really love these, so I need to read more Peter F. Hamilton. I want to read the Baslag trilogy. I want to read more of James Clavell in the Asian saga, which starts with Shogun. I want to read IQ-84 by Murakami. I want to read Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, which are humongous as well. And I want to read some Neil Stephenson, who is known for only writing books over 1,000 pages. So I've got a lot of reading to do. So that's it for today's video about the big old chunky boys. If you've made it this far into the video, once again, I thank you so much. Please leave a like and tell me about your favorite chunky books. If you've liked any of the ones that I've read, if you haven't liked them, give me some more recommendations of humongous books I can read. And please subscribe if you're new to the channel. I would love to have you along for the journey because I'm having such a good time. And that's it for now. So I'll see you in another video soon. Goodbye.